The fifth alarm clock seemed to wake even the dead. And I'm not dead yet. Just a 63-year-old woman who'd had a shift the day before in the cafeteria of the school where I'd worked for 37 years as an English teacher. Funny how life turns. I taught literature, and now I'm pouring compote for the people who took my place. I reached for the phone, 6 o'clock in the morning. Today was the big day. Garrett, Audra, and I were going on a cruise. Honestly, I'd been waiting for this moment for 2 years when I first heard about their family trip idea. It wasn't that I hadn't had the opportunity to travel before, but somehow there were always reasons to put it off. Either Dwight, my late husband, was busy at the auto shop, or Garrett needed money for college or a wedding or a down payment on a house. I slipped out of bed, careful not to disturb Marlowe, my ginger cat. I needed to gather the last of my things, feed Marlowe, make sure everything was turned off, closed, prepared. My neighbor Lorna promised to come by twice a day to feed the cat and check on the house. I trusted her. We developed a very friendly, if not friendly, relationship over the 15 years we'd been neighbors. An hour later, everything was ready, and I was dressed in comfortable pants and a blouse. Audra had insisted I buy new clothes for the trip. You don't want to look like a senior citizen, do you, Mom? Staring out the window, waiting for a cab. Garrett was supposed to pick me up, but he'd called yesterday and said he and Audra had to stop at the pharmacy before the flight, something urgent at work, so I'd meet him at the airport. The cab was on time. I petted Marlowe one last time, checked that the door was locked, and went outside. It was going to be a beautiful day. Cloudless skies, a light breeze, perfect weather for the start of a vacation. To the airport? The driver asked, loading my suitcase. Yes, please, domestic flight terminal. Paradise is a small town, and the drive to the airport took only 20 minutes. On the way, I admired the familiar streets, the palm trees, the brightly colored storefronts. As Dwight said, a city with a pretentious name, but no pretensions. We'd moved here 35 years ago, when Garrett was only 3 years old. Dwight got a good offer from a local machine shop, and I managed to get a job at the school. It's been so many years, and I still think it was the right decision. After paying the driver, I entered the airport building. It was pretty crowded for a weekday. I checked my phone. There were no messages from Garrett. Our flight was in 2 hours, so there was plenty of time. I texted him, I'm already at the airport. Where should I meet you? While I waited for a reply, I decided to check our tickets. I pulled out the file, opened it, and froze. Only my passport was inside. There were no tickets. I remembered exactly that I had put them here last night. I went through my bag, all my pockets, nothing. My phone beeped. A message from Garrett. Sorry, but you're not needed, bye. I reread the message twice, not understanding. What did extra mean? And why bye? Was this some kind of joke? I dialed his number, ringing, voicemail, tried it again, same thing. Called Audra, straight to voicemail. I sent a message. What's going on? Where are my tickets? No answer. 5 minutes, 10, 15. I sat on the bench in the waiting room, feeling panic rising from my stomach to my throat. I dialed Garrett again. This time he answered. Mom, I'm sorry. We've decided it's just going to be our vacation with Audra. You see, we need some alone time. Garrett, but we planned it together. I paid for most of the trip. My voice was shaking with indignation. Yes, and we're very grateful. Consider it your anniversary present to us. What anniversary? Your anniversary is in November and it's May. Listen, we've got to board. We still have the tickets. I'll pay you back when we get back. Don't make a big deal out of it, okay? We just want to be alone. I heard Audra's voice in the background. Tell her we'll call the hotel. We'll call the hotel, Garrett repeated mechanically. Sorry, Mom, really. And he hung up. I sat staring at the phone, disbelieving what was happening. My son, my only child, had just left me at the airport with no tickets, no explanation, taking my money. Tears came to my eyes, but I immediately restrained myself. No, I'm not going to cry, at least not here. I checked my wallet, and there was about $200 in cash, which I'd taken for out-of-pocket expenses on the trip. I had my credit card with me, too, but not much on it. I'd spent most of my savings on the damn cruise. Taking a deep breath, I tried to gather my thoughts. I needed to get home. Call a cab, open the door, apologize to Marlowe for coming home early, and then then decide what to do next. I was about to get up when the phone rang. Garrett's name popped up on the screen. Had he come to his senses? Yes, Garrett? Mom, I'm sorry for the inconvenience. His voice sounded strained. It's just that Audra and I haven't had a vacation together in a long time, you know? You'd be bored with us anyway. Garrett, this isn't about whether I'm bored or not. It's about what you did that was despicable. I spent $4,000 on this cruise. I told you I'd pay you back when we got back. Don't be so dramatic. That was the last straw. Don't be dramatic? My voice turned ice cold. You left your mother at the airport, took the money, and you're telling me not to be dramatic? See, he sighed. That's why we decided to go without you. You always exaggerate everything. All right, we've got a board now. I'll see you in 2 weeks. And the beeps again. I remembered how Garrett had called 2 months ago and said he'd found a great deal on a cruise, but he needed to book fast. He said he and Audra were a little short on cash and asked if I could help. Sure, I'll help, I replied then, without even thinking about it. It's for a family vacation, isn't it? We so rarely spend time together. I remembered other occasions. Garrett had borrowed money to fix the roof a year ago, and then he and Audra had bought a new car. How Audra forgot to invite me to Garrett's birthday party, and then told me it was an intimate dinner just for the couple. How Garrett promised to help with the bathroom remodel, but always found reasons to put it off until later. I thought it was okay to help my child, even when he was in his 40s. I thought a mother's love was unconditional support. But now, sitting in the airport with a suitcase and no ticket, I realized there's a difference between support and being used. My phone rang again. This time it was Audra. I almost didn't want to answer it, but I took the call nonetheless. Myrna. Audra's voice was sweet, as it always was when she wanted something. You do realize that Garrett and I need time alone, right? We've had some problems. This vacation was an attempt to patch things up. And to do that, you had to steal my money and leave me at the airport? Nobody stole anything, she said with a steely tone in her voice. Garrett said he'd pay me back. Besides, you're sitting at home with the cat anyway. What difference does it make where I sit? We really need this vacation. You could have just said you wanted to go alone. What's all the drama for? Oh, Myrna, you'd still be offended. Well, at least the money wasn't wasted. All right, we're boarding. Bye. And she hung up too. I slowly put the phone down, feeling something inside me that was broken and strong at the same time. It was a strange feeling, a mixture of deep resentment and sudden clarity. It was as if the veil had fallen from my eyes, and for the first time in a long time, I saw reality as it was. Through the large window of the terminal, I watched the plane that Garrett and Audra were probably on as it taxied down the runway. A snow-white bird, taking away my naivete and my belief in unconditional family loyalty. I sat alone in the airport with a suitcase designed for a 2-week trip and an emptiness inside that, oddly, didn't seem so frightening. Something told me that this emptiness was not the end, but the beginning of something new. A woman in an airport uniform walking by noticed my condition and stopped. Are you all right, ma'am? She asked with genuine concern in her voice. I looked at her and smiled in surprise. You know, I replied, I think I'll be fine soon. The Paradise Airport had never been particularly luxurious or grand. It was small, cozy, with a couple of cafes and souvenir shops, a typical provincial airport, serving mostly domestic flights. Now these familiar walls seemed foreign to me, cold. I sat on a bench near the check-in desk, watching people rushing to their boarding gates, hugging their farewellers, laughing, arguing, living their lives, and my life seemed to freeze. I tried to call Garrett a few more times, but now his phone was completely disconnected. And so was Audra's. They hadn't just abandoned me, they'd cut off all communication, like I was some annoying insect they'd finally gotten rid of. Tears came to my eyes, but I held them back by sheer force of will. Not here, not in public. I'm not going to let myself look like a pathetic old woman who's been abandoned by her children. I deserve better than that. Breathe in. Exhale. I had to decide what to do next. Go home? Taking a cab home would cost a decent amount of money, and I didn't have any extra money. It was all spent on the cruise. How about a bus? Yeah, that would be more economical. I got up from the bench and headed to the information desk to get the bus schedule. My heavy suitcase clattered across the tile floor, attracting the attention of others. Or did it just seem that way to me? Could it be that no one cared about an elderly woman with a suitcase hurrying somewhere alone? "What can I do for you?" the girl behind the counter asked. The name tag said, Winnie Frost Information Services. "I need the bus schedule to downtown Paradise," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Sure, I'll look it up right now." Winnie tapped on the computer keyboard. "The next bus is in 40 minutes. You can wait in the rest area on the second floor. It's more comfortable." She looked at me carefully and something flashed in her gaze. Understanding? Sympathy? "Are you all right?" she asked quietly, leaning over the counter toward me. "Yes," I answered automatically, but then shook my head. "Nunimptu. Not really." Winnie glanced at her watch. "I have a break in 5 minutes. If you want, we can have coffee together. You look like you could use the company." Her offer took me by surprise. Why would a girl I don't know be interested in me? But something in her gaze, the openness, the sincerity, made me say yes. "Thank you, that would be very helpful." 10 minutes later, we were already sitting in a small cafe on the second floor of the airport. We had 2 cups of coffee and a plate of scones in front of us. "I'm Winnie," she introduced herself, though I already knew her name from her name tag. "Myrna Chaffee," I said, wrapping my arms around the cup as if trying to keep warm. "So, what's wrong, Myrna?" Winnie asked me bluntly, but without being intrusive. "Were you seeing someone off?" "More like seeing me off, or rather sent away." I grinned wryly, and without knowing why, I told her everything. About Garrett and Audra, about the cruise, about the betrayal. The words poured out of me like a dam had burst. Winnie listened intently, not interrupting. When I finished, she shook her head. "I'm sorry to be blunt, but your son and daughter-in-law are assholes." I snorted in surprise. "You know, I never thought of them that way, but I guess you're right." "Of course I'm right," Winnie nodded firmly. "I've been working here 5 years, and I've seen things, but this—" She shook her head. She shook her head. "Dropping your own mother at the airport, taking her money, that's a new level of sleaze." "It's not so much the money as the act itself," I sighed. "I thought I knew my son. I thought he respected me at least a little." "What are you going to do now?" Winnie asked, sipping her coffee. "I'm going home. What else is there to do?" I shrugged. "I'm going to wait for them to come back and then, I don't know. I'll have to rethink a lot of things." Winnie looked at me thoughtfully. "Look, this may sound strange, but I have a proposition. I live alone in a fairly large apartment, a 2-bedroom apartment. The other room's been empty since my roommate moved out a month ago. If you want, you can stay with me for a few days until you decide what to do next." I looked at her in surprise. "Why would you suggest that?" "We don't know each other at all." Winnie smiled a little sadly. "My grandmother was in a similar situation a few years ago, only it was her husband who left her after 40 years of marriage, not her son. I know how important it is not to be alone at times like this. Besides," she winked, "I'm a pretty good judge of character. You don't look like the kind of serial killer who would stab me to death in my sleep." I laughed for the first time that day. "I promise not to kill you, at least for the first 2 nights." "That's a deal," Winnie brightened. "My shift ends in 3 hours. If you agree, you can wait for me, and then we can go to my place." "I have a car," I wondered. The suggestion was unexpected, but somehow it felt right. Going back to an empty house where every single thing would remind me of Garrett's betrayal? The thought of it made me sad. "Thank you, Winnie. I think I'll take you up on your offer. For a few days, if you don't mind." "That's great." She clapped her hands together. "Then I'll get back to work, and you can sit here or go shopping. I'll meet you at my counter at 16:30. After Vinny left, I remained seated in the cafe, pondering the strange turn of events. I was preparing for a family trip this morning, and now I was planning to stay with a complete stranger. Life really is unpredictable. To pass the time, I wandered around the airport stores, but I didn't buy anything. I had to save money. Then I found a quiet corner with power outlets, charged my phone, and called Lorna. "Lorna? It's Myrna. Listen, there's been a change of plans. I'm not going on the cruise." "What's wrong?" Lorna sounded genuinely concerned. It's a long story. In a nutshell, Garrett and Audra thought I was in their way, so they left without me. What? Lorna was outraged. What the hell? Pardon my language, but that's just outrageous. I know, I sighed. Look, I'm not coming home for a few days. I met this girl who offered me a place to stay. I need some time to recover. Can you keep an eye on Marlo? Sure, no problem. Don't worry about him. And you sure you're gonna be okay? This girl, you know her well? No, I just met her, I heard myself say. How weird that sounds. But she works at the airport, she has a name tag and a picture. I don't think I'm in any danger. Besides, I tried to make a joke, what's there to steal from me? All my money's already gone on a cruise ship. Oh, Myrna. Lorna didn't appreciate the joke. Please be careful, and call me when you get settled. Let me know the address where you'll be. I will. Thanks, Lorna. You're a true friend. As I hung up the phone, I suddenly felt tired. The emotional shock and uncertainty of the future were more exhausting than the physical exertion. I decided to go back to the cafe and order another cup of coffee so I wouldn't fall asleep on the bench. Sitting at the table, I continued to reflect on what had happened. Garrett had always been the center of the universe for me. After Dwight died 5 years ago, he was the only family I had left. I'd done everything I could to make him better, sometimes to my own detriment. I helped him financially, even though I was living on a teacher's pension, supported his decisions even when I didn't agree with them. And this is how he repaid me. Maybe it was my fault. Maybe I pushed him too hard, interfered too much in his life? No, I was never a clingy mom. I respected my son and his wife's privacy. And even if I had been, would that justify such an act? Memories of Garrett hugging me as a child, of telling me I was the best mom in the world, flashed before my eyes. Where had that boy gone? Or had he never existed and I was just seeing what I wanted to see? Those thoughts brought tears to my eyes again. This time I didn't hold them back. Let people watch if they were interested. I'm 63 years old. I've earned the right to cry when I'm in pain. When the tears were gone, I felt a strange relief. It was as if with each tear, some of the pain was gone, leaving room for something new. Anger? For determination? I didn't know yet, but the feeling wasn't the worst. I glanced at the clock. The end of Vinny's shift was still an hour and a half away. Deciding not to sit in the cafe, I went outside to get some fresh air. It was a warm and sunny May day. I found a bench in a small square in front of the airport and settled down there, watching the bustle of cabs, cars arriving and departing, people rushing about. Life went on despite my personal drama. What if, I thought suddenly, this isn't the end, but the beginning? What if this is a chance to change something in my life? The thought was frightening and exhilarating at the same time. For the past few years, I'd been living out of inertia work, home, taking care of Garrett and his family. What if now that that bond was proving so fragile, I could build something new, something of my own? I was reminded of dreams I'd once cherished. Traveling, photography. I was pretty good at photography when I was younger, even winning local competitions. Writing, I always wanted to write a book, but never found the time. There were always more important things to do, more pressing problems. And yet I'm only 63, I thought. Not 90. I still have time. That thought was like a breath of fresh air. It was like opening a door I'd forgotten existed. A door to a new life. A life where I'm not just Garrett's mom, not just a former teacher, not just a widow. A life where I am simply Myrna Chaffee, a woman with her own desires and plans. As I pondered this, I didn't notice how the time flew by. When I glanced at my watch, it was almost 4:30. It was time to head back to the information desk. Winnie was waiting for me, having already changed out of her uniform into jeans and a t-shirt. Without the formal attire, she looked younger, barely 25. Ready? She asked with a smile. Yes, I answered, feeling oddly light. I'm ready. We walked out into the parking lot where Winnie led me to a small blue Fiat. Please get in my carriage. She bowed playfully as she opened the door. As we drove out of the airport, I asked, Winnie, why did you suggest I stay at your place? Really, why? She gave me a quick glance, keeping her eyes on the road. I already told you because of my grandmother, but there's something else. My sister Shelley has a cafe downtown. It's small, but it's cozy. and she's looking for a part-time assistant. When you told me your story, I thought maybe you could use a part-time job, especially if your son doesn't pay you back right away." "A part-time job?" I looked at her in surprise. "You think your sister would take a 63-year-old woman? Why not? You look healthy and energetic. Plus, you have experience in the school cafeteria. And," Winnie winked at me, "Shelley trusts my intuition a lot." "That's very surprising," I said honestly. "But I guess I don't mind giving it a try. After all, I need something to do while I figure out what to do next." "That's great," Winnie brightened up. "Tomorrow I'll introduce you to Shelley. I think you two will like each other." We drove the rest of the way in silence. I stared out the window at the streets of paradise and thought about the strange turn my life had taken. In the morning, I'd been preparing for a cruise with my son and daughter-in-law. And now I was traveling to visit a strange girl and might soon be working at a coffee shop. Maybe Garrett's betrayal wasn't the end of the world, but the beginning of a new chapter in my life. A chapter where I would finally live for myself and not for others. The thought didn't seem so frightening anymore. Rather, it filled me with unexpected excitement and even anticipation. The Morning Wave Cafe turned out to be exactly as I had imagined from Winnie's stories. Small, cozy, with a nautical theme in the interior. Turquoise walls, wooden tables decorated with seashells and starfish, light instrumental music, creating an atmosphere of relaxation and peace. Shelley Frost, Winnie's sister, greeted me with a wariness she couldn't hide even out of politeness. And I understood her. It wasn't every day that a 63-year-old woman came to you with a recommendation from her sister and a request for a job. "So you worked in the school cafeteria?" she asked, scrutinizing me. "Yes, for the last 3 years after I retired," I answered. "Before that, I taught high school English for 37 years. "And why did you leave school?" I smiled, remembering the reason. "The principal decided to modernize the cafeteria, installed vending machines, downsized the staff, said it was more cost-effective." Shelley snorted. "And now the kids are eating that crap from vending machines? It's beautifully simple." "Exactly," I nodded. So I wasn't really upset. Besides, working in the cafeteria had been more of a way for me to occupy my time than a necessity. "And now?" Shelley squinted. "Winnie told me your story. It sounds like you really need the money." I wondered. "Do I really need money?" My pension wasn't much, but it was enough for a modest living. However, after Garrett took my savings, my financial safety cushion had shrunk considerably. "It's never too much money," I finally said. "But I need more than a job. I need something to occupy my thoughts and hands while I decide what to do next with my life." Shelley looked at me for a few seconds, then nodded as if making a decision. "Okay, Myrna, let's give it a try. I have an opening for a part-time position in the morning, 7 to 11. You don't have to cook, we have a cook. You'll take orders, serve the customers, keep the place clean. Can you manage?" "Absolutely," I answered confidently. "When can I start?" "Tomorrow." Shelley smiled, her face softening. "Come over at 7:30 and I'll show you around and explain everything." And so began my new life. Winnie's apartment was small but cozy, and the second room she offered me was quite comfortable. Winnie insisted that I stay with her for as long as necessary and refused to charge me for lodging. "Consider it an act of goodwill," she said. "You'll help someone someday." I contacted Lorna and asked her to bring me a few things from the house. I didn't want to go back there myself, at least not yet. She arrived with a small bag of clothes and assured me that Marlo was fine. "He misses you," she said, "but I spoil him so he doesn't suffer too much." The next morning, I started work at the Morning Wave. Even though Shelley had promised a gradual introduction, by the end of the first day, I was working as if I'd always been here. The system was intuitive, the customers were mostly friendly, and the job itself was a nice change of scenery from the school cafeteria. By the end of the week, I knew the regulars by name, could anticipate their orders, and even made a few suggestions for organization, which Shelley accepted with surprise and gratitude. "You're a real catch, Myrna," she said after a particularly busy morning. "To tell you the truth, I had my doubts when Winnie suggested you. I thought you'd be, old and slow," I suggested with a smile. Shelley looked embarrassed. "Something like that. But you were more energetic than a lot of the 20-somethings I'd had working for me." Years give you experience, Shelley. I winked at her. And experience teaches you to conserve energy and movement. That same evening, I got my first text from Garrett in a while. Hey, Mom. How are you? We're having a great time. The water is amazing. The food is delicious. Audra says hi. No apology, no remorse. It was like nothing had happened. I read the message a few times, but I didn't respond. What could I say? I'm fine, even though you left me at the airport and stole my money. Glad you're having a good time with my funds? I put my phone down and went back to the book I was reading. It was a detective book I'd borrowed from the small library on Vinny's advice. I rarely took the time to read before. I always had better things to do. Now I had a lot of free time, and I enjoyed the opportunity to immerse myself in the world of good literature. The next day, I got another message from Garrett. Mom, did you get my message? Why aren't you answering? Again, I didn't respond. Another day later, he called. I stared at the phone screen, watching his name flashing, and felt strangely calm. Before, I would have rushed to answer, afraid something had happened to him. Now, however, I just let the call go to voicemail. That same evening, when Winnie and I were having dinner, she asked, Don't you regret not answering him? I wondered. You know I don't. For the first time in years, I feel like I'm in control. That something depends on me. It's, liberating. Winnie nodded understandingly. You're stronger than you think, Myrna. Maybe, I agreed. Or maybe I'm just finally starting to respect myself. While I was settling into my new life in paradise, Garrett and Audra were enjoying a cruise in the Caribbean. Sunshine, beaches, poolside cocktails, all the things we dreamed of when we planned this trip together. Judging by the pictures Garrett posted on social media, yes, I checked, although I didn't want to admit it, they were having a great time. On the fifth day of their trip, something happened that no one expected. I was just finishing my shift at the coffee shop when my phone went off with a series of notifications. Garrett tried calling me over and over, and in between the calls came messages like, Mom, answer it! It's urgent! Please, Mom! At first, I wanted to ignore that too, but something about the persistence of his messages made me worry. What if something serious had really happened? I answered another call. Garrett, Mom, finally! He sounded excited. We have an emergency. What's wrong? I asked, trying to stay calm. There's a fire on the ship, in the engine room. We're all being evacuated to some island. Oh my God, I breathed. Are you okay? No one's hurt? We're fine, but it's awful, Mom. There's panic. Everyone's screaming, running. Audra's hysterical. I could actually hear screaming and some noise in the background. Where exactly are you right now? We're on St. Lucia. It's one of the Caribbean islands. We were dropped off here because the ship can't keep going. Mom, the conditions here are terrible. The hotel they put us in isn't even 2 stars. And the cruise company says they can't do any better because all the decent seats are taken. I felt a wave of irritation rising in me. Their ship is on fire. They could have died. And Garrett is complaining about the hotel? At least you're alive and well, I said dryly. Yes, but you have no idea what's going on here. Audra's crying because she's out of hair mask, and the local stores don't have any, and the food is weird, and the Wi-Fi keeps going out. I rolled my eyes, glad he couldn't see it. Garrett, it's just a temporary inconvenience. When are you coming home? That's just it, Mom. His voice hit a high note. The company declared bankruptcy, right today. They said they couldn't pay for us to come home. Now that was serious. What? How is that possible? I don't know. They claimed the fire was the last straw, that they were already in financial trouble. Anyway, they told us to find ways to get home on our own. And we're almost out of money, Mom. It's not like we planned for this kind of expense. Did I plan for you to steal my money and leave me at the airport? I thought, but I said out loud, This is a really serious problem, Garrett. What are you going to do? Mom, we need money for tickets home. Can you wire us? Well, at least $2,000? That should be enough for economy class. I felt laughter coming to my throat, a nervous, bitter laugh. Garrett, I don't have that kind of money. You took my savings, remember? But you had to have something left. A credit card, something else? My credit card is almost empty, and I'm renting a room now because I didn't want to go back to an empty house. You're renting a room? He seemed genuinely surprised. Why? You have a house. I thought I'd get a change of scenery, I said evasively. Anyway, Garrett, I can't help you financially. But Mom! There was desperation in his voice. We're stuck on the island. What are we going to do? Should we go to the consulate or ask other passengers for help? We've already tried, but the consulate says the process can take days, and other passengers are in the same situation as us. I sighed. Garrett, I really don't know how I can help. I don't have that kind of money right now. But you could take out a loan or borrow from someone. Mom, we're really sick here. I closed my eyes, trying to collect my thoughts. Part of me wanted to help. It was my son, after all, and he was in trouble. But another part of me remembered how he'd left me at the airport, how he'd taken my money, how he hadn't returned my calls. Garrett, I'll think about what I can do, I said finally. But I can't promise anything. Thanks, Mom. The relief in his voice was almost palpable. I knew I could count on you. After the conversation, I sat in the cafe staring at one point. Shelley, noticing my condition, came over to me. Everything all right, Myrna? I told her about the situation. She listened without interrupting, then shook her head. What are you going to do? I don't know, I answered honestly. Part of me wants to help him. He is my son, after all. But another part of me remembers what he did to me, and I don't want to lift a finger. It's a tough call, Shelley agreed. But you know what? You don't have to decide right now. Give yourself some time to think about it. What if they're really in trouble? From what you've told me, their lives aren't in danger. Yeah, they're uncomfortable, but they're not on a desert island. There are hotels, food, a consulate. After all, they can go to the authorities for help. I nodded, realizing she was right. Thank you, Shelley. Sometimes you need an outsider's perspective. That evening, the phone rang again. This time it was Audra. Myrna, her voice sounded pitiful. You've got to help us. It's awful here. It's hot, humid, insects everywhere, and the hotel doesn't even have air conditioning. I'm sorry, Audra, I said, trying to sound sincere. But like I told Garrett, I can't send you that much money. But you can think of something, sell something, borrow from a neighbor. Myrna, we're desperate. I know this is hard for you. My voice remained calm. But I really can't help you financially. What about your parents, Audra? They're on a Mediterranean cruise. I don't want to bother them. I almost laughed at the irony of the situation. I see. Well, then you'll have to look for other options. Maybe a credit card? We've already reached the limit, she almost shouted. Myrna, you don't understand. We have to go home. Garrett has a pharmacy. I have clients. We're losing money every day. I'm sorry, Audra, I repeated. But I really can't help you. They called a few more times after that, but I didn't answer. Instead, I sent a message saying, I'll see what I can do and get back to you later. Winnie, who had been watching all this, asked, What are you going to do? I smiled at her. You know, I'll really think about what I can do. But first, I want them to be a little bit in the skin of a man who's been abandoned with no money in a strange place. Winnie laughed. Myrna Chaffee, you're an amazing woman. No, I shook my head. I'm just an ordinary woman who has finally learned to respect herself. I slept soundly that night, despite the dozens of missed calls and messages from Garrett and Audra. In the morning, I got up, got ready for work, and headed to the coffee shop with a light heart. No matter what happened next, I knew I was doing the right thing. Not out of revenge, not out of a desire to hurt them, but out of respect for myself and my boundaries. And it was a new, amazing feeling. I noticed him on my third day at the cafe, a tall man with a neatly trimmed gray beard, always in an ironed shirt and a book in his hands. He came in at 8:30 in the morning, sat at a table by the window, and ordered the same thing, black coffee and oatmeal with fruit. Sometimes rye toast with avocado. For an hour, he would read, make notes in a small notebook, and leave, leaving a generous tip. That's Mr. Dower, Shelley explained to me when I asked about him. One of our most loyal customers. Been coming in every day but Sunday for 3 years. What does he do? I asked him as I watched him absorbed in his reading. Former lawyer, retired now. Said he was one of the best in the state. Specialized in family law, if I'm not mistaken. Very intelligent and pleasant man. I nodded and went back to work, but I glanced at him periodically. There was something soothing about his presence, the way he turned the pages methodically, the way he occasionally stopped to take a sip of coffee or write something down in his notebook. On the fourth day, he spoke to me. "You're new." It wasn't a question, but a statement of fact. His voice was deep, with a slight hoarseness. "Yeah, I've only been working here a few days," I said, filling his cup of coffee. "And you're doing a great job," he smiled, and the corners of his eyes crinkled. "I'm Quinton Dower." "Myrna Chaffee," I introduced myself. "Thank you for the compliment. Have you ever worked in the service industry before?" "For the last 3 years in the school cafeteria. Before that, I was an English teacher." His eyebrows raised in slight surprise. "Interesting combination. What made you change from blackboard to tray?" "Retirement," I shrugged. "And the desire to do something." "I see," he nodded. "I couldn't stay at home after I retired either. First, I counseled aspiring lawyers, then I started writing a book." "About law?" "About people," he smiled. "About how the legal system affects their lives, how it changes them. In 35 years of practice, I've seen all sorts of things." "That sounds interesting," I said sincerely. "When you're done, I'd love to read it." "If I do," he grinned. "Sometimes I think I like the process of writing more than the result." New visitors came over and I had to get back to work. But this short conversation left a pleasant impression. The next day, Mr. Dower, Quinton as he asked to be called, spoke to me again, this time about a book he was reading. It was a historical novel about the Civil War, and his admiration for the author's style was infectious. "He writes like he was there, you know? You can smell the gunpowder, hear the screams of the wounded. It's a rare gift to make history come alive." I hadn't read the book, but his enthusiasm made me want to borrow it from the library. Thus began our fellowship. Every morning at his customary 8:30, we exchanged a few phrases. About books, about the weather, about the news. Nothing personal, but always pleasant and intellectually stimulating. After a week of such conversations, Quinton came in with a small paper bag. "I brought you the book I was talking about," he said. "I thought you might be interested." I was touched by the gesture. "Thank you, Quinton. I'll be sure to read it and bring it back to you." "Take your time," he said with a wave of his hand. I still have many unread books at home. That evening, I began to read the book I'd been given and could not tear myself away until late that night. Quinton was right. The author had an amazing gift for bringing a story to life, making it personal and affecting. The next morning, I couldn't resist sharing my impressions as soon as he showed up at the coffee shop. "I've read half of it already. This is amazing, Quinton. Thank you for sharing." He brightened up like a child receiving praise. "I'm glad you enjoyed it. There are several other books by this author. If you'd like, I can lend them to you." "I'd love to," I replied. I hadn't read anything so exciting in a long time. Quinton stayed longer than usual that day. When the traffic died down, I was able to sit down at his table for a few minutes, and we continued discussing the book. It was the first time our conversation went beyond a brief exchange of phrases, and I found myself very comfortable in his company. Over the next few days, our interactions became more regular. Quinton would sometimes come in near the end of my shift, so we could talk without the distraction of work. We discussed not only books, but art, music, and traveling. It turned out that we had many common interests despite our different professional backgrounds. About 2 weeks after we met, as we sat in a coffee shop after my shift, my phone went off with a series of notifications. It was Garrett trying to contact me again. I sighed and muted the sound. "Is there a problem?" Quinton asked, noticing my reaction. "Family stuff," I answered evasively. He nodded without insisting on details, and that was one of the things I liked about him. He respected personal boundaries. But that day, for some reason, I felt the urge to share. Maybe it was because the tension that had built up needed to be released. Or maybe it was because Quinton had a way of trusting me. I told him everything about Garrett and Audra leaving me at the airport with my money, about the fire on the ship and their current problems, about my mixed feelings about it. Quinton listened attentively, neither interrupting nor judging. When I finished, he was silent for a while, thinking about what I had heard. Myrna," he said at last, "from a legal point of view, what your son and his wife did can be characterized as fraud." You entrusted them with money on certain conditions, which they violated. I don't want to sue them, I said quickly. This is my son after all. I understand, Quinton nodded. And I'm not suggesting a lawsuit. But knowing your rights can be a useful negotiating tool. Negotiations? Yes. When they come back and probably ask for your help again, you'll be in a stronger position if you know your legal options. I've been thinking. It had never occurred to me to consider the situation from a legal perspective. For me, it was a family matter, painful and personal. But a professional's perspective gave me a new perspective. What would your advice be? I asked. Quinton leaned closer. First, keep all the evidence text messages, phone records, bank statements. Second, when you talk to them, avoid emotional arguments and focus on facts. Third, he smiled slightly, let me help you put together a plan of action. Why do you want to help me? I asked bluntly. Because I can, he answered just as bluntly. And because what they've done is wrong. I've spent 35 years protecting people from injustice. Old habits are hard to break. There was no patronizing or pity in his words, just professional interest and human sympathy. That was the payoff. All right, I nodded. I accept your help, thank you. Over the next few days, Quinton and I strategized. He helped me draft a document that recorded all the facts. How much money I'd invested in the cruise, under what conditions, how I'd been excluded from the trip. It was not an official legal document, but rather a memo to me so that I could clearly argue my position when talking to Garrett and Audra. The important thing is not to get emotional, Quinton advised. As soon as you start yelling or crying, they'll get the upper hand. Stay calm and businesslike. I appreciated his advice, but I appreciated even more that our conversations weren't limited to my problems. We continued to discuss books, art, share memories and opinions. I learned that Quinton was married for 40 years until his wife died of cancer 5 years ago. They had no children. It didn't work out, he succinctly explained. He traveled a lot in his youth, loved jazz and classical literature, and had a dog named Chester, a Labrador he rescued from a shelter. In turn, I told him about my life with Dwight, about teaching, about my love of photography, which I had abandoned after Garrett was born. We discovered that we both loved old black and white movies and classical music, both preferred paper books to ebooks, and both didn't understand modern art. You know, Myrna, Quinton once said, I'm glad you started working at this cafe. My mornings have become much more interesting. Mine too, I replied, feeling my cheeks warming. Meanwhile, according to the reports and calls, Garrett and Audra's situation on the island was getting more and more uncomfortable. I stopped ignoring them completely, but I didn't rush to help either, limiting myself to brief replies and promises to think about it. One day when I did answer Garrett's call, he was desperate. Mom, you have no idea what's going on here. They moved us to an even worse hotel because the old one was being cleared out for some important guests. There's not even a proper shower, and the locals are always trying to sell us something, and they don't understand the word no. It's really unpleasant, Garrett, I said calmly. How are things going with the consulate? Slow. They say they're working on it, but it's been over a week. Audra's crying all the time. She's allergic to the local fruit, and there's no good food here. Mom, you have to help us. I know this is hard for you. I kept my voice steady as Quinton had advised. But like I said, I don't have the means to send you that much money. I'm barely making ends meet myself right now. But you could sell something. Or borrow. Mom, please. Garrett, I took a deep breath. Let's be honest. You took my money. $4,000 that I've been saving for years. Money that was supposed to go towards our vacation together. Then you cut me out of the trip at the last minute, leaving me at the airport with no ticket and no explanation. And now you're asking me to sell something or go into debt to help you out of a situation you've put yourself in? There was silence on the other end of the line. Then Garrett spoke, his voice sounding surprised. Mom, are you mad because we went without you? Really, it was just a joke. We were going to give you your money back. A joke? Now it was my turn to be surprised. Dropping your own mother at the airport with no money and no ticket is a joke? Well, maybe not a joke, but we didn't know this was going to happen with the ship. We thought we'd come back, give you the money, and everything would be fine. How do you think I felt when I read your... I'm sorry, but your redundant bye-bye message. What do you think I was going through at that moment? Silence again. Then, Mom, I hadn't thought about it. Audra and we were having problems, and we needed some alone time. We didn't mean to hurt you. But you did, Garrett. And not only did you hurt me, but you stole my money. We didn't steal it. There was resentment in his voice. We were going to give it back. But we didn't. And now you're asking for more. Because we're in trouble. Mom, are you really going to leave us here just because you're offended? I sighed. This was it, the emotional manipulation Quinton had warned me about. Don't give in, he'd said. Garrett, I'm not abandoning you. I just can't help financially. Contact the consulate, talk to other passengers. Maybe you can join forces. Mom, you've changed. There was surprise in his voice and something else. Fear? You used to always help me, always be on my side. I'll always love you, Garrett. You're my son. But that doesn't mean I have to let you use me. After that conversation, the calls became less frequent. Audra sent me a long message describing how awful they lived, how they suffered from heat and insects, how the local food gave her an upset stomach. I replied briefly, I sympathize with your difficulties. I hope the consulate will soon resolve the matter of your return. Quinton, when I told him of these conversations, nodded approvingly. You're holding up very well, Myrna. Setting boundaries but not burning bridges. That's a wise approach. Thank you, I smiled. Sometimes I wish I could just tell them what I think of them. What do you think? He asked, tilting his head. I wondered. It's not that I hate them, you know. It's more like disappointed and a little sorry for them. They live such shallow, selfish lives. All they care about is comfort and status. Something went wrong in Garrett's upbringing if he grew up like that. Don't blame yourself, Quinton said softly. Children make their own choices, no matter how they were raised. I've seen enough family dramas to know that sometimes the most loving parents make the most ungrateful children, and vice versa. Maybe you're right, I sighed. But it still hurt to realize that your only child was capable of such meanness. Of course it hurts. He covered my hand with his in a gesture of support. But you handle that pain with surprising dignity, Myrna. His touch was warm and soothing. I didn't take my hand away, and we sat like that for a few moments, connected by that simple human contact. You know what? Quinton suddenly said, let's take a break from all this trouble. There's a photography exhibit opening in town about Old Paradise. You said you're into photography. Why don't we go together? The suggestion took me by surprise. Was it like a date at 63, after being widowed for so many years? The thought was both frightening and exciting. I'd love to, I heard myself say before I could think about it. Quinton brightened. Great! The exhibit is open until 7 o'clock tonight. Maybe tomorrow after your shift? That sounds great, I smiled, feeling a slight excitement I hadn't felt in years. When I told Winnie about the invitation the next day, she smiled slyly. Myrna Chaffee, you have a date. Who'd have thought it? It's not a date, I protested, my cheeks burning. It's just two people with common interests going to an exhibition. Sure, Winnie winked. What are you going to wear on this non-date? I realized that I was actually more worried about my appearance than usual. Since I'd started working at the cafe, I'd been wearing simple clothes, jeans, t-shirts, comfortable shoes. But for the exhibition, I wanted to look more elegant. I have a blue dress, I said thoughtfully. I haven't worn it in a long time, but it's pretty. Blue is a good choice, Winnie said. It brings out your eyes. That evening, getting ready to go out, I was as nervous as a teenager on a first date. Luckily, the dress still fit well. I'd paid more attention to my makeup than usual, and I'd even worn the earrings Dwight had given me for our 20th anniversary. Looking in the mirror, I saw a woman who looked alive. Yes, there were wrinkles, gray hair, the marks of years gone by. But there was also a spark in her eyes that I hadn't seen in a long time. Life really is full of surprises, I thought as I left the room. Winnie whistled when she saw me. Wow, Myrna, you look amazing. Don't exaggerate. I was embarrassed, but pleasantly flattered. Not at all. Quinton will have to pick his jaw up off the floor. At that moment, the doorbell rang. Quinton, like a true gentleman, had come to fetch me rather than offer to meet me on the spot. He looked elegant in light-colored pants and a dark blue jacket, with a small bouquet of wildflowers in his hands. "For you," he said, holding out the flowers. They reminded me of our conversation about wild gardens. I was touched that he remembered this small detail from our conversations. "Thank you, Quinton. They're beautiful." While I put the flowers in a vase, Winnie enthusiastically introduced herself to Quinton, and judging by their casual conversation, they hit it off right away. "Don't stay out too late, kids," Winnie said jokingly as we left. "And Myrna, don't do anything I wouldn't do." "Winnie!" I blushed, but I couldn't help but smile at her restless spirit. Quinton offered me his arm, and we headed to his car, a neat silver sedan. I was filled with a strange feeling, a mixture of excitement, joy, and slight anxiety. Like I was opening a new chapter of my life, unexpected and full of possibilities. And all the while, somewhere on a faraway Caribbean island, my son and his wife continued to struggle with discomfort and try to find their way home. But tonight, I chose not to think about that. Tonight was my night, my little adventure, and I was going to savor every moment of it. I hadn't heard about Garrett and Audra's return from them, but from Lorna. She called Saturday morning while I was making breakfast for me and Winnie. "Myrna, I just saw your son and his wife. They look awful, I tell you. Tan to black, gaunt, and I think they're wearing the same clothes they left in." "Did they come to the house?" I asked, feeling strangely calm. "Yes, knocking, calling. I went out to see what was the matter and told them you were temporarily living elsewhere. They were, not very polite, especially your sister-in-law." "I can imagine," I sighed. "Thanks for the warning, Lorna. They asked for your address. I didn't give it to them, said you'd contact them yourself if you wanted to. You did the right thing. Thanks again." After the call, I checked my phone. There were indeed several missed calls from Garrett and a message, "We're back. We need to talk. Urgent." I showed the message to Vinny. "What are you going to do?" she asked, spreading jam on her toast. "I think I should meet them, but not at home, somewhere neutral. Maybe our cafe? Shelley and I will keep an eye on you." I smiled, touched by her concern. "Thanks, but I'll be fine. I think I'll meet them in the park. It's crowded, and I'll call Quinton and see if he'll be there, just for moral support." "And legal advice," Winnie winked. "That too," I agreed. Quinton agreed without hesitation. We agreed to meet at the park at 2 in the afternoon, and then I texted Garrett, "Meet me in Central Park at the fountain at 2. I'll have a friend with me." The reply came almost instantly. "Why a friend? This is a family affair." "That's why I need support," I replied and turned my phone off, not wanting to continue this discussion. Winnie helped me pick out an outfit. Nothing too formal, but not casual clothes either. Khaki pants, white blouse, light cardigan. "You look confident and stylish," she approved. Quinton was waiting for me at the park entrance. He was in a light-colored suit, no tie, with an unchanged notebook in his hand. We had become very close in recent weeks. After that first exhibition, we met regularly. We went to the movies, to concerts, just walked around the city. It wasn't the ardent romance of youth, but a deep, mature bond based on mutual respect and common interests. "Nervous?" he asked as we walked toward the fountain. "A little," I admitted. "It's one thing to talk to them on the phone, but it's another to see them face to face." "You'll be fine." He squeezed my hand. "Just remember, you didn't do anything wrong. You're protecting your boundaries, and there's no shame in that." I nodded gratefully. His support gave me confidence. Garrett and Audra were already waiting at the fountain. Lorna wasn't exaggerating. They looked shabby. Tanned to an unnatural shade, with peeling skin and wrinkled clothes. Audra looked particularly haggard. Her usually perfectly styled hair was in a sloppy ponytail, her makeupless face looking gaunt. They spotted us when we were a few feet away. Garrett started to smile, but his smile faltered when he saw Quinton. "Mom?" He stepped forward as if he wanted to hug me, but I took a barely perceptible step back. He stopped, dropping his arms awkwardly. "We're so happy to see you." "Hello, Garrett, Audra." I nodded to both of them. "This is Quinton Dower, a friend of mine." "Nice to meet you," Quinton said, extending his hand. Garrett shook it reluctantly, and Audra just nodded. "Why don't we sit down?" I suggested, pointing to the nearest bench. We settled down, Quinton and I on one bench, Garrett and Audra across from us. There was silence for a while, as if no one dared to start a conversation. So, I finally said, "You're back. How did that happen?" Garrett and Audra looked at each other. "The consulate finally organized a repatriation flight," Garrett answered. "We had to leave most of our belongings behind as collateral for the hotel. But the important thing is that we're home." "That's good," I nodded. "I'm glad you're safe." There was silence again. Then Audra couldn't take it anymore. "Myrna, why did you bring that man?" "We wanted to talk to you alone. Quinton is a friend of mine, and I wanted him here," I replied calmly. "Besides, he is a former lawyer, and his advice was very useful to me." "A lawyer?" Garrett turned pale. "Are you going to sue us?" "I didn't say that." I looked him straight in the eye. "But Quinton helped me understand my rights in this situation." Audra snorted. "What rights? Garrett is your son. We're family. That's why what you did was especially painful." My voice remained calm, though everything inside was trembling. "You didn't just deceive me, you betrayed my trust." "Mom," Garrett stepped forward, "we already explained that we didn't mean to hurt you. We just needed some time alone, and we were going to get the money back." "But you didn't," I pointed out. "And now I guess you can't because you spent it on the island." Garrett lowered his eyes. "Yes, the situation with the ship has complicated things, but we'll be sure to get it back as soon as we can. We just need time to get back on our feet." "And help," Audra added. "Myrna, we're in a terrible position. Garrett's pharmacy has been closed for 2 weeks. We've lost customers, our credit cards are maxed out, and we have no money to pay our bills." "I'm sorry to hear that," I said sincerely, "but I don't see how I can help." They looked at each other again. "Mom, we were thinking, maybe we could stay with you for a while, until we can work out the financial problems." There it is, just what I expected. Quinton beside me tensed slightly but said nothing. "Garrett, I don't live in that house anymore," I said. "What?" He looked genuinely surprised. "But the neighbor said you were temporarily elsewhere." "I sold the house," I said, shocked. "The deal closes in a week. I've already taken all my stuff out of there, except for the furniture." "Sold it?" Audra looked like I'd announced the end of the world. But why?" "Because it's too big for one person, and because I decided to change my life." Garrett looked lost. "But where are you moving to? Did you buy an apartment?" "No." I took a deep breath, preparing to say what I had planned to say. "I'm going to travel." "Traveling?" Garrett looked at me incredulously. "Are you kidding? At your age?" I felt Quinton tense up even more, but I put my hand on his knee, letting him know I could handle myself. "At my age, Garrett, a lot of people are still living life to the fullest. I'm not going to live out my days in a rocking chair, waiting for you to come asking for money or favors again." "Myrna!" Audra was indignant. "How can you say that? Garrett loves you. We both love you." "That's not what love looks like, Audra." I shook my head. "Love is respect, caring, honesty. I didn't see any of those things in your actions." Garrett changed tactics. "Mom, look, we made a mistake. We admit it. We're very sorry, but we're really desperate right now. We have nowhere to live. Are you really going to throw us out on the street?" "I'm not throwing anyone out, Garrett." My voice remained firm. "You're adults. You have education, jobs, connections. You can handle it." "We can handle it?" He was almost shouting. "How? We have no money. We have no money to pay the rent. The pharmacy is on the verge of bankruptcy." "You might have to rent a room temporarily instead of a whole apartment," I suggested. "Or look for a job with a more stable income. Maybe get a loan from the bank." "No one will give us a loan with our credit history." Audra looked desperate. "Myrna, you're our last hope." I looked at them both, scared, angry, desperate. Part of me still wanted to help them, to protect them, to save them. But I knew it would be a bare favor. They would never learn to stand on their own 2 feet if I continued to be their safety net. "I have a suggestion," Quinton said suddenly. We all turned to him. "I know a good financial advisor who specializes in situations like this. He could help you work out a plan to get out of the crisis. I can arrange a meeting if you want." Garrett and Audra looked at him in disbelief. "How much would it cost?" Garrett asked. "The first consultation is free," Quinton replied. "After that, it will depend on the complexity of your situation. But he works at a reasonable rate and sometimes agrees to pay by results." I was surprised by this suggestion. Quinton had never mentioned such a counselor before. Perhaps he was improvising, trying to find a compromise. Think about it, he added. I'll leave you his contacts. Garrett looked uncertain, but Audra, to my surprise, nodded. That, that might help, she said. Thank you. There was a pause. Then Garrett looked at me again. So, you're really going to travel? Where to? Europe for starters? I said. I've always wanted to see Italy, France, Greece. Alone? There was disbelief in his voice. I looked at Quinton and he nodded slightly. No, not alone. We're traveling with Quinton. Garrett stared at us, shifting his gaze from me to Quinton and back again. Are you two together? I mean, as a couple? Yes, Garrett. I saw no point in denying the obvious. We're dating, but, you barely know each other, he exclaimed. You don't know anything about him. Mom, this is crazy. We know each other enough to know that we're good together, I replied calmly. And unlike some people, Quinton has never given me reason to doubt his integrity. Audra snorted. Oh, of course. He showed up just in time for you to have trouble with your son, and he happens to be a lawyer. Don't you find that suspicious? No, I don't. I looked her straight in the eye. Quinton was a regular at the cafe where I'd been working for the past few weeks. Our acquaintance was completely casual, and importantly, he'd been honest with me from the start. Working? Garrett asked. You worked at the cafe? Yes, and it was a great experience. I met some great people there. Garrett shook his head as if he couldn't believe what was happening. Mom, I don't recognize you. You sold your house, you worked at a coffee shop, you're dating a man you barely know, and you're about to leave the country? That's not like you. Maybe you just never really knew me, Garrett, I said softly. Maybe you've only ever seen the part of me that was comfortable for you. The caring mother, the one who's always there for you, the one who turns a blind eye to your mistakes, the one who forgives any offense. But I'm more than just your mother. I'm a woman with my own desires, my own dreams, my own plans, and now I've decided to follow them. But, he looked lost. But what about us? What do we do? The same thing all adults do, Garrett, I answered. Take responsibility for your decisions and their consequences. Find a way out of difficult situations. Grow stronger. And you're just going to leave us in the lurch? There was accusation in his voice. I'm not abandoning you, Garrett. I will always be your mother, and I will always love you. But I'm not going to sacrifice my life to save you from the consequences of your own actions. He stared at me for a long moment, as if seeing me for the first time. Then suddenly his shoulders slumped and he nodded. I understand, he said quietly. I don't like it, but I understand. I was surprised at his sudden humility. Maybe deep down he knew I was right? Or did he just realize he couldn't manipulate me this time? Quinton, Garrett turned to him. Can you really put us in touch with this financial advisor? Sure, Quinton pulled a business card out of his pocket. Here are his contacts. Tell him you're from me. He'll make time for you in the next few days. Garrett took the card and looked at it carefully, then tucked it away in his pocket. Thank you. We all rose from the benches. There was a moment of goodbye and it was awkward. I didn't know whether to hug Garrett or just shake his hand. Finally, I stepped forward and gave him a brief hug. It's going to be okay, Garrett, I said. You're stronger than you think. He awkwardly hugged me back. When are you leaving? He asked, pulling back. In 10 days, I answered. First to Rome, then on an itinerary we're still working out. For how long? A few months, maybe longer. We haven't decided yet. He nodded as if accepting that. Will you, be in touch? Of course, I smiled. I'll send you pictures and tell you about our adventures. Okay, he tried to smile back, but it wasn't very convincing. Have a good trip, Mom. Thanks, Garrett, and good luck to you both. Quinton and I watched them go to broken, lost people who had to rebuild their lives. I had mixed feelings, regret, sadness, but also relief, and a strange sense of freedom. You did great, Quinton said when they were out of sight. I'm proud of you. Thank you, I sighed. It was harder than I expected, but also easier. What do you mean? I was afraid they'd push harder, use more manipulative tactics, but they gave up quickly. Maybe they finally saw you not just as a convenient mother, but as an independent person with a will of her own, Quinton suggested. That changes the dynamic. Maybe, I agreed. And thanks for the suggestion about the financial advisor. It was unexpected but very helpful. Quinton grinned. I do know such a person. He'll help them if they really want help. And if they don't? Then it's their choice. He shrugged. We did what we could. We walked slowly through the park, enjoying the warm day and each other's company. I felt strangely calm after everything that had happened, as if the last stone had fallen from my shoulders. So, Quinton said after a long silence, Rome in 10 days? Rome in 10 days, I confirmed with a smile. I can't wait, he took my hand. I've booked a small hotel in the Trastevere neighborhood. They say it's the most authentic and picturesque neighborhood in the city. Sounds perfect, I squeezed his hand. You know, I never thought I'd be starting a new life at 63. Life is full of surprises, Quinton smiled. And I'm glad this particular surprise brought us together. 10 days flew by. I'd finalized the sale of the house and said goodbye to Winnie and Shelley, promising to send them postcards from every city we visited. Lorna agreed to take Marlowe in for good, as she and the cat had become good friends during my absence. I had only received one message from Garrett during that time. Met with the consultant. He suggested a plan. Thanks. Succinct and unemotional, but it was a step toward growing up. And so Quinton and I were back at the Paradise Airport, the same airport where my son and daughter-in-law had abandoned me 2 months earlier. But things were different now. I wasn't a confused victim of circumstance. I was a woman who had made a conscious choice, ready for a new adventure, with a man who respected me and appreciated me for who I was. We were sitting in the waiting area with about an hour to go before our flight. Quinton was reading something on his tablet, and I was looking out the big window at the airfield where airplanes were taking off and landing, taking people to new places, to new experiences. What are you thinking about? Quinton asked, noticing my pensive look. About how strange life is, I replied. 2 months ago, I was sitting here abandoned and betrayed, not knowing what to do next. And today I'm here again, but with a ticket to a new life. Life rarely goes according to plan, Quinton said philosophically, but sometimes it takes unexpected twists and turns to get us where we need to be. I looked at him with gratitude. This wise, kind man had come into my life just when I needed support. Not to save me, I had saved myself, but to remind me that I was worthy of respect, care, and love. They announced boarding for our flight. We got up, gathered our carry-on luggage, and headed for the gate. As we passed the seat where I had sat 2 months ago, I paused for a moment, remembering my feelings at the time: hurt, humiliation, confusion. Is everything okay? Quinton asked, noticing my hesitation. Yes, I smiled at him. More than okay. We'd checked in, gone through security, and now we were on the plane, taking our seats by the window. I'd never been superstitious, but I thought there was something symbolic about being at the airport again. But this time, flying toward my dreams instead of being left behind. The plane started to taxi onto the runway. Quinton took my hand. Are you ready for an adventure? I looked out the window at the distant airport terminal, at the city that had been my home for so many years, at the life I was leaving behind. Then I looked at Quinton, at his kind face, at the crinkles in the corners of his eyes, at the hand holding mine. More than ready, I replied, squeezing his hand. More than ready. The plane accelerated and lifted off the ground, taking us to new horizons, new experiences, a new chapter of my life. A chapter that I wrote by myself, by my own rules, with my own characters, and it was the most exciting adventure of all.